Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged. Hey there, welcome back. I am Glenys, and I'm here with my podcast buddy, Aaron. Aaron, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. Loving summer.
Yeah, I'm waiting for summer to sort of begin for me, I feel like. I've been working way too hard.
Oh, no, I'm all in.
Ah, man, you've been working hard, though. You've been busy.
Yeah, but I'm enjoying summer. I get to wear flip-flops and, I don't know. We get the grill going.
I mean, you do know it's LA. We can do that all year round here, right?
Oh, that's true. But, there's something about the vibe of summer. And also, my family is gone a lot for the summer, so summer is
summer bachelor.
Yeah.
Woo,
yeah.
woo.
I actually went and saw a movie by myself yesterday.
You did? What did
Yeah.
you? Well, anyway, we won't bore the people with the details, but
I saw Rocket Man. I don't mind. My life
I
is
wanna see
very
that.
interesting.
yeah, I totally want to see that. And I need to get on it before it leaves theaters.
Yeah,
I
you
feel like
do.
the movie cycle is so fast now. I remember movies being around forever for when I was a kid. But then
Yeah.
again, a week probably seemed like forever when I was a kid. So, but yeah, it is kind of nice for summer. I mean, I'm a lot sweatier. So there's
Yeah.
that.
That's a thing.
You're right. I did get my sandals out of the closet, so that's a thing. And then I'm planning some time off, and I can't wait to get in the ocean. So happy.
So I think I'm going to put that on the docket for maybe a future episode. Is talking about being fat during the summer.
Oh yeah, we got to do that.
I think that'd be
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah,
Because you're right, sweat's real.
sweat is real. This is not a thing I experienced as a young person, and a thinner person who was actually under my normal body weight, and I was freezing all the time. So, which is why I moved to California. And now that I'm like my normal weight, I'm like, oh, like I'm a normal temperature. But that means I deal with like in real heat, I'm really sweaty. So yeah, we will talk about this in depth at a later date.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's going on with you, Glenys? What can we let our listeners know is new in the world of Glenys?
Yeah. So I am working with Rebecca Scritchfield on our Haze for Diabetes Care course 2.0. It's going to be a much expanded version of what we've been running. So we're going to have online content and the interactive group part of it as well. And it's going to give people a longer amount of time to process and to work through the material. And it's going to be great, and it's going to launch soon. So what I'll do is I am going to put the link to our site, our previous site. That might change, but I'm just going to put the link in the show notes and sign up there to get on the list for finding out when this launches. And that's the best way to sort of get the information early before everybody else. And so just sign up there. And that is what I've been working on. And I'm excited for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it looks like feverishly working. Because I get updates whenever you all have done some audio recordings. We use a similar system, so I'm like, dang, they're busy. So I'm so excited that you're doing this.
Feverish.
And I think it's a great resource. So well done.
And that's the, before, our groups are limited to, we can only have like 8 or, 10 people in at a time because you want to give everybody a chance to talk. But these, this new program is going to expand access to everybody who needs it. And it's really health at every size, care, a very holistic, way to look at caring for yourself with diabetes or any sort of blood sugar abnormality. So I'm super excited. And really, honestly, for anybody who struggles with self-care, it could be useful. We do happen to focus a little bit more on diabetes, but when I'm looking at this material, I'm like, this is like lessons for life. And if you struggle with self-care, this has got a lot of great coaching happening in it. So I'm excited.
Awesome.
Yeah. How's your men's group going?
It's good. I think I found some time where I'm actually going to be doing it probably the end of the summer through September. So stay tuned for that. I think, if you just keep checking my social media on Instagram and Facebook, you will definitely get updates for that. And also just check my website. And that will be coming shortly. I'm still doing a lot of speaking, so I'll be going to Birmingham, Alabama very shortly in July. So there's an eating disorder conference there. And then I'm really excited I get to go up to the Bay Area and speak at the IADEP in the Bay Area in the middle of September. So that is super exciting too.
That's awesome. My old stomping grounds, the Bay Area.
Yeah. And still, seeing clients in my practice. So if you're interested in working with me, please send me an email and we'll get something on the books and work together.
Yeah, as am I. Still accepting clients. I've been busy, but I have room for you if you need it. So please feel free to reach out through my website.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Today we're talking to somebody who we use as a resource for our clients constantly.
Literally constantly.
Like every client gets this.
Yes, I'm not lying.
Yeah, no, me neither. Yeah. And then we're like, we should have this person who wrote this on our podcast because we know her. She's in our community. We love her. And I'm like, well, that speaks to our organization here. But that we haven't had her on sooner. But it is, no time like the present. So Meredith Noble, her website is Made on a Generous Plan. That's her business. She wrote this essay about grieving the thin ideal and that process that people go through when they realize, like, I am probably going to have to give this fantasy or this dream up of being thin. And I send this to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great article. I use it all the time also. And actually, the first time I read it, I was like, yes, like this is perfect. And what I love so much about the article, and we'll definitely link to it, is it's not just an article where it goes through and gives you just describes what's going on. Meredith did a really good job of putting some exercises within each section that really it becomes like your own workbook in a way. And so she was very thoughtful in how she did it. And I'm pleased to share it with as many people who need it, because really a lot of folks do.
Yeah, I give homework around this. I'm like, you need to pick some stuff that she's talked about here, and you need to. I'm so bossy. You need to do this. I ask people if they would be willing to do some of the things that she's listed in her article, and I think that it does help people to, at the very least, read it and contemplate the information. And so, So Meredith, let's just read her bio here.
Yeah.
Meredith Noble is a certified body trust provider. Aaron, she's one of your peeps. And coach who helps plus size and fat identifying people find food and body peace and fat liberation. Her practice combines health at every size and intuitive eating philosophies with feminism and fat acceptance. With her compassion and expertise, her clients learn how to feel more comfortable in their skin, be at ease around food, and leave toxic diet culture behind. And we love her.
Yes. That's not in the bio. We just added that.
No, I added that. And she's Canadian, so finally we're getting some Canadian representation on the show besides me.
Oh, we've had plenty of Canadians on the show, I will say.
I guess we have. Yeah, we've had a few Canadians. That's true.
Okay.
Ooh, all right. Yeah.
All right. So without further ado, without too much of us floundering through, let's listen to our interview with Meredith Noble. Meredith, we are so happy to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. And, I think we each, one, we want to discuss, an article that you wrote a while back, but like each of us use all the time. But, you are the emulsion that brings Glenys and I together in many ways. The Canadian part of, really resonates with Glenys, and, you're a body trust provider. So really you are like what brings us and bonds us together. You are the glue that will hold this show together. So
I think what you're saying is that Meredith is the best of both of us.
Pretty much. That's it.
I was just thinking I was like the ham in the sandwich, basically, between your two slices
the
of bread.
podcast will now be taken over by Meredith.
Yeah. You are the Dijon to our balsamic vinaigrette.
I love it. Well, I'm honored to be here, and I love you both, so I'm looking forward.
Glenys and I each have been talking about, this article that we're going to go over, but it's an article you wrote, I think a while back, if I'm not mistaken, correct? But it's called How Body Acceptance Begins Really with the Grieving the Thin Ideal. And it's a really powerful article, and we'll definitely link to it in our show notes. But, I always love a good origin story. So can you give us just an idea of like how you like sort of got the inspiration to write that, how it sort of came about, and maybe even the origin story of like how you came into this work?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can tell the origin story of how I got into the work, and then that kind of flows into the article. I came into it through personal stuff. Like I actually had written this essay about this horribly fat phobic video by this Canadian, and it makes me ashamed to be Canadian. Her name was Nicole Arbor, and she did this YouTube video called Dear Fat People. It was just like the most horrendous stuff you could ever imagine. And I wrote this essay that was called Dear Non-Fat People, that was trying to explain like what it's like to be a fat person. And one of my friends introduced me to Health at Every Size as a result of reading that article. She was like, I think you might be interested in this movement. And she sent me to someone she knew who was a coach. And I discovered these concepts, and it was just life-changing. I started working with my own dietitian, and, I had been, chronic dieter for years after being told that I needed to lose weight by my doctor in my 20s. And it was so liberatory. And around that time, I was actually burning out in my previous career. I worked in tech for over a decade, and I started to feel like, like people need to know more about these concepts. And I think I want to be someone who helps bring that about. Like I want to introduce this to other people and support them on their own journey. So I changed careers, and I decided to become a coach. And that was mainly because I wanted to kind of test the waters and see, like, do I really want this as a career first? And now I've actually decided to go back to school and become a counselor as well. So it was a few years ago that I wrote this article. And it was actually at the beginning of my body trust training, Aaron. And I wrote it because one of the essays that we were asked to read as part of the body trust training was written by this woman named Jeannie Courtney, or maybe Jean Courtney. And it was an academic paper called Size Acceptance as a Grief Process, Observations from Psychotherapy with Lesbian Feminists. So it was specifically talking about lesbian women, and she had laid out this grief process for size acceptance. Hillary and Dana, who run the body trust training, had elaborated on it in their own handout, I think, that they gave us, but there was nothing available publicly at the time. And I was just like, this is really important for people to know, because everyone I talked about it with, they were just like, this resonates so deeply with me. Like they really identified with it. And I just felt like, okay, like a resource needs to exist to help people kind of conceptualize it like this. Because I think conceptualizing like this is incredibly validating. So I just built on what Hillary and Dana had written and what Jeannie Courtney had written. And I combined it with tools that I had in my toolbox as a coach, some somatic resources, and just other ways to help validate and what people were feeling and give them ways to kind of process those emotions.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I've met Jean Courtney a long time ago.
Oh, good. You know how to pronounce it. Good,
I don't.
thank you.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Because I know how it's spelled. It's Jeanne. And you're right. I was thinking like, oh, I wish I knew how to say it. Because it was so long ago and I was so nervous, and it was like an early foray into health at every size. And
That's cool, though.
She had an event at her home, and it was an intuitive eating with an instructor of mine. And it was just like in her office that's, I think, near her home. But
cool.
it was like, oh, there are people who do this. This is amazing, And so I'm so glad you were able to build on that and make this invaluable resource.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is. It seems to have gone far and wide. Yeah, and I keep thinking maybe I should go back and like revise and update, because it has been a few years now. But I'm glad it continues to be a helpful resource for folks.
Yeah, I send it to literally all my clients. Because what they say is, I feel bad about feeling bad about my body.
Right? Yes.
And I say, you know what? It makes sense that you feel bad about your body.
How could you not in the society we live in?
Exactly. And what this, what your article says is like, it acknowledges all the reasons why we would feel bad about this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't something we just invented in our heads. So, it's, I think for them, it's like a relief to see, oh, I get to feel sad about this for a while. And I think that's really important, like grieving the fantasy that you had, or maybe even what you had. Maybe some people are coming from, I had a thin body at some point. So, but this to me is like the thing I send to everybody.
I agree. And for me, I think what the powerful thing that about this article is it allows for folks like Glenys and I, who are dietitians, who don't get any training in how to sit with grief or let our clients experience grief. I think it empowers us as clinicians to be able to sit with that and our clients as they experience it, instead of, moving through it or trying to push through it or trying to even like not even naming it, dismissing it. And I think this is really helpful for clinicians, because it gives us an idea of how to sit with some of these feelings that our clients are going to bring in to the office.
Yeah. And like, I am not a dietitian, but like, I firmly believe it's within the scope of a dietitian to support, like, to be present and hold space for these emotions.
Well, isn't that human, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, it's just relational, just to like be with someone as they're grieving. So yeah, I'm glad it's able to be that kind of support. And I just think, like you said, it's the validation. It's just like, okay, I'm not weird for thinking this. It's okay for me to feel this way. It's okay for me to take my time here, right? As opposed to like, I need to rush through and I need to like, I feel like the kind of our Instagram culture just makes it kind of seem like this rush to get to like the quote unquote end of this journey, whatever that is. I don't think there really is an end to the journey, but I think it allows some space. Like, no, like I'm allowed to take time to just like feel these feelings and be where I am and not have to rush through to any particular place.
Right. Now, one of the stages you talk about is anger in the grieving. And you talk about how that can be really healthy to express. So when you're working with clients, can you tell me more about that process of how you help them channel anger into something more positive or something useful in this journey?
Yeah. So I actually think anger in itself is useful and positive, which is very counter to what our culture has taught us. But I believe that all emotions are helpful, and they're here to give us They're here to give us their wisdom. They're healthy to experience and healthy to express. And particularly those of us socialized as female within this culture have not been given much of an opportunity to express our anger in safety. So first of all, I just, again, like to validate the anger and support people in recognizing that it's okay to feel it. There's nothing, you don't need to suppress that anger. You're allowed to express it in a healthy way. I really like, there's this woman named Carla McLaren who wrote a book called The Language of Emotions that I just love. And I'm in the middle of doing some training with one of her trainees at the moment. And she talks about emotions as messengers. This isn't in the essay, and this is one of the things I think maybe I should update. But she talks about anger being something that maintains healthy boundaries. So when you feel angry, it's because one of your boundaries has been transgressed by someone or something. So when you feel anger, you can be like, okay, what boundary has been crossed by something or someone? And you can even take it further and say, like, what value that I have, like something I value has been impinged on or threatened in some way. So it can be this really beautiful way to really get in touch with what you value in the world. And so I like to frame it like that for people. In the case of anger around like not being able to achieve this thin ideal, I also like to support people in externalizing the anger. And this is actually part of body trust too. I know you know this, Aaron, like externalizing the blame. I think it can be really easy to accidentally direct the anger towards ourselves. Like, oh, I'm so stupid for falling prey to these lies, when actually it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, Glenys, like how could you not believe what you were told in this culture when it's literally everywhere, and like everything underscores these same basic ideas that we have to achieve this thin ideal. So I also, while we're looking at like, okay, what value do I have that has been threatened in some way, it's also a question of like, where should this anger be directed? And the anger should be directed at the culture. Like it is this, I don't even know how big the weight loss industry is now. I need to get an updated stat. Like when I wrote this, it was like $60+ billion. It's probably even larger now. Like that our anger should be directed at that industry. Our anger should be directed at the society that continues to push these messages and not at ourselves, because there's kind of no way you could grow up in this society and not fall prey to these messages. Like it's pretty much impossible. So, on the values, like we can think about like, okay, well, actually what I value is, I mean, it could be different for everyone, right? But if we're feeling angry that we've fallen prey to, that if we're feeling angry about the $60 billion diet industry, or the fact that we were told lies about, the relationship between health and weight, we can think of like, well, what I value is truth. What I value is having a relationship with myself. There could be any number of answers. So I support people in kind of thinking through what are my values. And then we can ask these additional questions. What must be protected and what must be restored? So it could be, I want to protect my time, my money, my energy, my integrity. I want to feel that I am being true to myself and not following these lies. And maybe what needs to be restored after all these lies you've been told is your relationship with yourself. Like maybe you were told that you couldn't trust yourself. And maybe what needs to be restored is that trust and that beautiful relationship with who you are just as you are, without aiming for this much smaller body. Does that make sense? I kind of went on for a while there.
Totally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also, like, as you were talking about anger, and I think about the men, or those identifying as men and socially raised as men, is how the narrative around anger is also probably maybe the only acceptable emotion.
Yes.
That can be displayed, and how to like sit with anger and use it or let it or feel it in a safe way also, right? It's just a different construct about how like it's maybe the only thing you are allowed to show.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, right? And when we get to, if we talk about sadness later, like that being one that is kind of unsafe for men to express.
Right.
Yeah. And so like back to the actual expressing of anger, I like to suggest that people find some way to do this that feels okay to them. Like it can be easy to kind of explode our anger over another person, and that's not necessarily the most socially healthy thing to do. There may be repercussions of that, but there are ways to like express it. Like anger, when we're in anger, we're often in this fight or flight place, and we like, in order to get out of that, sometimes we need to complete the fight. And, it could be like I've recommended to people, like take a pillow and like, punch it as hard as you can, or like throw it against the couch, or like take a wiffle bat or something, and just like pound a pillow, or like find a safe place to scream. There aren't a lot of safe places to scream in our society, but like, if you can get your car in an isolated place, if you happen to have a car, and like close all the doors and windows and like just scream and just like get that out in a way that isn't necessarily like hurting another person, that can be, it can feel really good and can kind of, I don't want to say complete the anger cycle, but it can kind of move you forward in your anger to actually express it as well. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about too with Aaron, with men, is like, maybe it hasn't been channeled in a way that's productive sometimes, or just explodes in a way that is not necessarily that helpful.
Right.
So that's another suggestion I give people, is just like, actually like let yourself feel it. It doesn't have to be a physical expression of it. It could just be like, getting out a pen and piece of paper and just like scratching like, or drawing something really aggressively, or like just something that gets that anger out, can be really helpful. And that doesn't mean like at the end of that, the anger is going to be gone. Like, this is a long process. It's not immediate, but it can be helpful.
Yeah, I've had clients say like, oh, I don't really feel anger. I never get angry. I'm like, well, you have anger. You're just, you have an eating disorder. You're just channeling that anger back inward towards yourself. So if we can think about, learning to experience it and feel it, for what it is, instead of sort of this turning it back on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it not being a bad thing, right? Like anger is an important part of being human.
Yeah.
Like it lets you know where your boundaries are. Like, wow, like that's so wise, right? Like our bodies are so wise. And like your anger is letting you know like exactly what you value in this world.
Yeah.
I
would say too, the big fear is, well, I think people think I'm a very angry person because I'm always on a rant of some sort. And I think they think that because I'm angry, I'm also not happy. And those are really two different things. I'm like, no, I'm angry much of the time about what is happening in the world on many different fronts. At the same time, I am a content person because I know how to channel that anger and recognize it. And, if I have to stew in it, that's fine. But I'm generally also a very content person with my life. So you can be both angry and happy at the same time.
So true.
It doesn't define like, Glenys is an angry person. I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes aren't we all? Shouldn't we all be? And, I have lots to be angry about in the world, not just for myself or like a lot of people. So like, it's good to feel it and recognize it and let it be there. And I no longer worry about being an angry woman.
That's good. Yeah.
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 Because fuck everybody.
Because like,
I had to say that.
once you recognize the amount of injustice in this world, like, yeah, of course, there's going to be immense anger that follows. Like that just seems like a rational response to the injustice. And that actually segues into the other thing that I suggest people do. And this is not necessarily something I suggest at the very beginning, but like channeling that into activism, which I know both of you have done, can feel really good. Like when you're like, the anger that comes up is sort of in this phase is often just kind of at the world and at society. And it can sometimes it could feel like, well, there's no one to get angry at specifically. So like that maybe may not feel, I don't know, like as satisfying in a way. But if we can channel that anger into activism and actually feel like we're doing something to fix the thing that we're angry about, that can feel very good and can help us deal with kind of this ongoing anger at the continued injustice we're witnessing.
And I think that, that activism piece, I don't know, I find it like really, it does make me feel like I'm a part of a change, right? Instead of just letting it happen to me and to other people, like I'm doing something, and it like you said, it validates the feeling, but also like, hey, here's something I can do with it that's going to affect just people outside of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think for some people, they feel the pressure to become an activist too soon before they have really like solidified their own roots in this work. And like that can sometimes not like backfire is a strong word, but sometimes they can feel a little insecure about like, oh, am I saying the right thing about like how all this stuff works? So I always just tell people like, you get there when you get there, and, it'll come naturally and organically at the rate it's supposed to. Like you may start in a small way of like just posting something on your Facebook page for your friends to see. And then, you may, I don't know, become more vocal in a place where you're witnessing hatred towards a fat person or whatever it is. So I always like to mention that part.
Yeah. And I like to reassure people too, it's okay if you never become an activist.
Yes.
As long as you're an activist for yourself and you're defending your body boundaries and against, the culture,
exactly,
and people who want to invade that your sense of self. So that you don't have to be like, the person shouting from the rooftops. If you want to be, that's great too. But if you are quieter about it, just make sure that you're defending your own self.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's a form of activism because we're at least, you're out there and you're not one more person contributing to a toxic body hate culture. That if you're modeling, just by saying, I'm okay with me,
Yes.
that's a huge piece of activism. Just modeling, kindness to yourself and acceptance.
It's so powerful. I say that to my clients too. Like just existing in this world as a fat person and not feeling ashamed about that is a form of activism. Eating a donut in public is a form of activism. Charlotte Cooper, who wrote the book Fat Activism, talks about microactivism, and I really love that concept of just like these little everyday things are a form of activism too.
In this article, you mentioned sadness. You talk about a lot of difficult emotions, obviously, within this article, but sort of, again, naming them and giving us tools on how to sort of move through them. You also talked about, in addition to sadness and anger, you spend a lot of time also talking about depression. And I think those three feelings are really, things that are challenging in our society to both name and feel and go through. So, as you're sort of thinking about these really difficult feelings, and as you've seen clients go through this process, where do you see them like spend the most time in general? I know people have an individualized process through this, but I'm wondering if you notice a place where people resonate more with some of these difficult feelings.
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to point out that like even though Kubler-Ross, who invented like the stages of grief, talks about them as stages, I think she does anyway. That like really all of these like when I see them in clients, they are all mixed up together, like all one jumbled experience all at one time. Like much like you were saying, Glenys, like I can be happy and angry at the same time. Like you can be experiencing the sadness of this and the anger and a little like a tinge of denial and like, so like it's really not linear, and actually it's like often like all of them all at once. I feel like I'd be really curious what you guys see, but I feel like most of the time I see people is like depression in the sadness. It's just so, and I work exclusively with people who identify as plus size or fat, and so there's like just this there were so many hopes pinned on achieving this thin ideal. And some of those hopes were rooted in escaping oppression, which is so understandable and valid. And so like, I feel like mostly people are just sad about like, if, you know, oh my God, like what if I'm going to be this size forever and I have to endure this forever? That's a really, really hard place to be in. And I feel like that's what we spend most of our time talking about. I'm curious what you guys see.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I talk, my clients do kind of feel that way, right? Like, well, it's almost like but I feel like I have to give up then. And if I give up, I can't handle that. And, you know, we talk about, well, you're handling it right now. You're here. Right. And so I spend a lot of time sort of talking about that sadness that they feel.
And I would say sadness and depression for sure. I can, you know, think about the similar theme of just feeling like, is this what I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life? And and again, like you said, like these sort of dreams of living in a smaller body are like saying goodbye to those dreams is really hard. And I feel that's where a lot of people spend a lot of time, you know, feeling what, you know, is experiencing those feelings.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the essay, The Fantasy of Being Thin by Kate Harding? Have you guys read that one?
Oh, yeah. That was one of the first ones I read.
It's such an amazing article because she really talks about how it wasn't just being thin that she was imagining. She had all this magical thinking around what being thin would give her, that like, oh, suddenly when she was thin, she was going to have like a totally different personality, you know, and that like men would flock to her and she would like, she would be the kind of person who snowboards and like just had all these things kind of attached onto that thin ideal. And I really appreciate that because I think it's important to kind of separate like different aspects of the sadness. It's like, okay, what things am I sad about just because it was actually kind of magical thinking about what thinness would bring me? And what things am I sad about because of like genuine, like fat phobia is real and fat oppression is real? I like to kind of tease that out because I just think it can feel so heavy, like just so like, yeah, inundating of this sadness. And if we can kind of tease out, like, actually, like, can we work with what this fantasy was and see that actually it wasn't it wasn't realistic? And not only that, but you can do all of those things now in whatever your body you're in and help them kind of realize like, oh, I can have the life I wanted however I am now. That can kind of help alleviate the sadness. And it doesn't alleviate, obviously, the sadness of like this whole other part that is just like, it can suck to be in a larger body in this culture. But I feel like that can lighten it.
Yeah. Nobody congratulates you when you are gaining weight. And everybody congratulates you when you are losing weight. So, you know, I talk about, yeah, you are going to lose for real the kudos of the world. So that is a genuine loss that you're going to experience. At the same time, there are, you know, you can still have the kind of life you want to have.
Exactly.
You don't need everybody's blessing for that. So yeah, there are very real things that you lose, and then there are the fantasy things that we lose, and it's good to know the difference.
Yeah. And finding community can be such a balm for all of these emotions, really. But I think particularly the sadness. Like, I feel like a huge part of the fear of not achieving that thin ideal is not being accepted. And yeah, maybe there are going to be some like jerks who are fat phobic who are not going to accept you, who are probably not worth being socially tied to at all. But if you can find other people who genuinely do accept you at whatever size you're at, just as you are, I find, yeah, it can be an amazing balm for that sadness.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that. Because one of the things, what I find I'm thinking of a couple specific clients I work with right now that where it's that depression is so strong, that sadness is so strong that it's so hard to like find the community. Like I actually have to leave my house to find the community, or even go online, right? I mean, it's like it can be even hard there, and especially you're in Portland. We're here in LA, where I think it's harder to on some level to find that community. How do you talk to clients about trying to step out and find that community? Like, do you have any tangible things that are helpful there?
Yeah, I appreciate that point. Yeah, I'm like in like fat Mecca over here, like in Portland, and I recognize that. Although in LA, you guys have the she's all fat people and other cool stuff. But not everyone is in a large city where like most of these, a lot of these
Sure.
events are taking place. Not everyone is ready for it, right? So I'm with you. Like with a client like that, we might just like maybe the connection that we have is just the two of us in this room or over this video conference. And, I can be that connection and that validation to you while you're working through these very valid emotions. I sometimes will recommend, I don't know. Facebook is hard because a lot of people don't want to be on Facebook these days. And so I will recommend groups that feel more intimate. Like sometimes people can be kind of overwhelmed, or like they go into a group and there's like 2,000 people in there already.
Right.
So like finding smaller intimate groups or encouraging people to like, again, this may not be suitable for the person who's like afraid to reach out, but like encouraging people to create their own community locally. That takes some courage, right? But like putting yourself out there and saying like, does anyone want to start a book club and like read, intuitive eating or body respect with me, things like that. Does anyone want to have a clothing swap, a plus size clothing swap, or things like that? That's kind of maybe like 201 instead of 101, which is what you're asking about. It's hard. I don't really have any go-tos if someone's not quite ready for that, except like to reassure them that you can, you don't have to participate right away. You can just observe. And so much can be gotten just from reading other people's stories and like seeing yourself reflected in them. Like, oh, I relate to that. Like that can be immensely healing. Going into a place like Instagram where like you're not committing to being in a group, but you can still like kind of comment on a post here and there and maybe get someone responding to you. That can be something too. But yeah, I don't have any like amazing panaceas for that particular problem other than just like holding space for the individual and letting them take their own individual journey. Like community is not the only balm for depression, right? Like feeling that emotion and thinking about like, what sadness is there to let us go, to support us in letting things go. Like when I think of kind of the wisdom of sadness, that's how I see it, is just like sadness is here to support me in letting go of this thing that is no longer serving me. And I may not be quite ready to let go of it yet. It may take some time to kind of figure out like, what is going to take its place, and thinking about like the opportunity in letting that ideal go is actually pretty beautiful. The idea of accepting myself as I am and coming into this new relationship with myself and kind of rediscovering myself, right? Like I think we can be so attached to that fantasy that we lose ourselves. And the idea of like being able to kind of reacquaint ourselves, gently and incrementally, can actually be a pretty beautiful thing. I don't know if I answered your question at all, Aaron. It's hard.
Well, I'm actually gonna plug going to your site, because you've done a really good job of cultivating like Instagram lists of and people that you should have on your feed, right, in social media. And I think that's helpful. At least seeing what other people are doing in different areas, like maybe inspires you to do it where you are.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. And really like reiterating, just like just seeing other people who are going through this journey and being able to relate to them is a form of connection, and just can feel so good. Like, because I think, I don't know about you guys, but like I suffered in isolation for the longest time. I was just like, I am weak. I am failing at these diets, and it just felt like my own individual problem that was just like such an immense source of shame as a result, right? So so literally just seeing that, like, no, like everyone is dealing with this, can be so helpful.
Yeah.
My problem was that I was succeeding at my diet for too long. Succeeding in quotes. That wasn't really a problem as other people saw it, but there was this, what I suffered in was this fear of losing that thin body. And so that was sort of a suffering in silence. Like, I'm so terrified of not being this size. And then finally confronted with the reality of, like, do you want to live your whole life being inauthentic and terrified? And then sort of moving away from that, which was also very scary.
So hard to give up. Yeah.
But it was actually less hard to give it up than it was to keep it going. So to be honest, like, I'm like, how much less can I eat at this point? This is not working. So, but it definitely, there's a lot of isolation. And I felt at the time there was nobody else. I was in school at the time, and I didn't really have any kind of fat community at all. So it was like seeking it out online was all I could do at the time. So unfortunately, but then I have friends who were like, who ended up being fat positive. And so once you start finding those people, it's like, oh, I have people. This is amazing.
Yes. And I think actually, like, I've had a number of clients, like often the first step they will take is like, okay, maybe I'll share this article about health at every size on my Facebook page. And it's always kind of amazing because people that they had no idea would be receptive to it will like it or comment on it. And like, it's just like this gentle way. Well, I don't know. It's scary. Like, it can be legitimately scary, but like, finding out that there are people you didn't even know were receptive to this who are already in your circles can be pretty cool.
Yeah. And so now once somebody is sort of ready to, they're having all their feelings, but they're ready to like actively do something to help improve their body image. You've written about this. You said there's the number one thing you can do to improve your body image. And I agreed with this because I do this with my clients, but tell me what it is.
It is feeding your brain with images of all different kinds of people. I say it's the number one thing because, well, our brains create this norm in our head, right? It's kind of cool in a way that like our brains will like take all the images we see and kind of average them and be like, okay, this is what's normal. But the problem is that in our media, all we're seeing are the tiniest people, the tiniest women and the most strong men, and certainly no like non-binary or trans people. And our brain is just like, oh, that is normal. So like there have been studies on this, like if you start to show yourself images of diverse people, your brain will just automatically be like, oh, that's normal too. And that's normal too. So I always get people started on this basically in their first session because it is incremental. The sooner we can do it, the earlier we're like starting to get these new images in our mind, and then they start to take effect. So you mentioned, Aaron, that I have a resource on my page. I actually went through and found tons of amazing fat folks who predominantly post photos of themselves. So it doesn't have just kind of activists like me, for instance. Like I don't post that many photos of myself because I don't want to take up space as a smaller fat person. But I posted, people who post lots of photos that you can follow, and like you just take in their images and you you work on seeing like the genuine beauty of all of humanity, of disabled humanity, of queer humanity, of fat humanity, of people of color humanity, and your brain just starts to work its magic over time.
Mm.
Yeah. I wish I could remember where I read this or the person who said it, but it was a great quote. And it said, if you only ever looked at daisies your whole life, and you only thought there was one kind of flower, and it was a daisy, and you finally saw a rose, you might think that was really weird.
Yes.
And I think that is like, we are only fed images of the, stereotypical tiny women and strong men. And we think that's normal, where that's like a tiny percentage of the population. And I think it actually also causes us to filter out in our everyday lives larger people that we even encounter on the street. And I tell people, open your eyes and see everybody. See all the sizes, because there are many fat people walking around. This is not a unicorn situation. But some people admitted, I think I am filtering out. I'm only seeing the thin people on the street at this point, because I'm only recognizing their humanity somehow. Because that's the only image I've ever seen in our image-driven society.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had never quite thought about it that way, but I think that's true. That like fat people are just kind of rendered invisible in so many ways. And yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. I often say, like, if the CIA only knew, they would just hire fat middle-aged ladies, because we're like literally invisible to the world.
Oh God. Oh,
I mean, Melissa McCarthy did a movie,
Yeah, isn't there a movie called
that.
Spy?
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And I think they really need to consider, like, hey, do you know how many, people seem to just either not see me or like, oh, she's so harmless, And I'm like, I'm not.
So how do we know they're not already doing this?
How do you know I'm not a spy?
Hey, and listen,
you don't.
I've found some holes in your backstory. I mean, and I'm just curious about them. But that's another
Canadian,
show.
You are Canadian, yeah.
Quote unquote Canadian, yeah.
Her backstory is that she's Canadian. Meredith and I are both spies.
Yeah. When I say like find the beauty in humanity, I also just like to say like I'm talking about just kind of like general, like, aren't human beings amazing and glorious, and not just like, oh, they're so beautiful, I love that curve. Like I use it in a very holistic way, because I don't want us just to be like judging people based on like this very aesthetic thing, whether that's, a fat beauty or a queer beauty or whatever. I want it to be like, wow, they're beautiful as humans, and I can see that.
Yeah, I remember Hillary Canavy, when she was on our podcast, said, and this really resonated with me, she said, when she sort of opened your eyes to what's out there, like everything is beautiful suddenly. And you can see everything as sort of this beautiful thing. And you're not just talking about an aesthetic beauty. It's, wow, isn't life amazing? Isn't everything amazing? So
yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And so expand your palette, right? And the first places to start, and I do this too with my clients, is I send them a list of blogs, like fat fashion blogs is where I start. Like that's just the easiest, most accessible thing, I think, for a lot of people. Although I have other sites included where they have large positive images of fat people. And I also I realized like when I first made this list, like, oh, like, gosh, everybody on this is like hourglass and maybe not that fat. And so I revised my list and went through to try and find people that represented all different shapes and sizes.
That's great. That is the issue with the fat stuff, with the fashion stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there's still like this idealization of this hourglass, like small fat woman.
Right. And so people, I think, resonate with what looks most like them initially. And of course, I want them to expand that as well, but they relate to somebody who's like, oh, you're round like me, in the middle. So I want them to be able to find that representation in this list.
Yes, I'm so with you. I always recommend find someone who has your body, and people who are way larger than your body, and people like who are a different color from your body, all that, of course. But like finding someone who carries weight where you carry your weight is pretty cool. And I know you guys have also done Vivian McMaster's stuff in terms of like taking like self-portraits and seeing your body. And like, it's a very similar thing, right? Like the more our brain sees photos of ourselves or other people, like, again, that just begins to feel more normal and less, like often people will feel like comfortable seeing like their face because they see it all the time in the mirror. But the moment there's like a shot from like the side where like they see their arm or their belly in a way they don't, like, part of the reason why that is so uncomfortable is just because we're not used to it. So it's actually a very similar principle.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I think this has been a great discussion. I think there's going to be a lot of great things that people will take from this. And we will for sure link to the article that we've been discussing in detail because everyone should be reading it and it's very helpful to everyone. So, just thanks for taking time and speaking with us. And when you revise that article, let us know. We will definitely let people know to reread and get any updates that you can share with us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, now the pressure's on to do some
Yeah,
updates.
exactly.
Yeah, I will let you know for sure. Yeah, thank you
Awesome.
both. It's been a great conversation.